The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached beyond their solar system. After centuries of looking up at the stars and wondering if they were alone, they had built ships that could travel faster than light. They had spread to 23 colony worlds across the galaxy. They had hoped to find friends among the stars. They found something else instead, Captain. Daniel Harper stood on the bridge of his starship, the Resilience. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles during Earth's last great war. Now he commanded humanity's finest exploration vessel, leading a crew of 200 souls into the unknown. His communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Dawson, looked up from her console. She was young, barely 30, with red hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and fear when she spoke. She told the captain that they were receiving a transmission from the alien station ahead. Daniel felt his heart beat faster. This was the moment humanity had waited for. First contact with an alien civilization. He ordered her to put it through. The main screen flickered to life, and Daniel felt his excitement turn cold. The creature that appeared was massive, easily 8 feet tall even while sitting. Its skin was the color of wet stone, and it had 4 arms that ended in hands with too many fingers. But it was the eyes that disturbed Daniel the most. They were like pools of liquid silver, completely without warmth or emotion. The alien spoke in perfect English, its voice deep and rumbling like distant thunder. It introduced itself as High Commander Verthon of the Dominion of 12 Stars. It said that humanity had been watched for 300 years. Daniel kept his face calm, even as his mind raced. 300 years of observation meant the aliens had been watching since humanity first split the atom. They had watched the world wars, the peace that followed, the slow climb to the stars. And they had never made contact. That worried him more than anything else. Verthon continued speaking. He explained that the Dominion controlled this region of the galaxy. He stated that they had brought order to 47 species, ending their wars and guiding their development. He paused, and his silver eyes seemed to grow colder. He told Daniel that humanity's rapid advancement and aggressive nature made them a threat to galactic stability. He demanded that Earth submit to Dominion oversight immediately. Daniel felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. He responded that humanity had come seeking friendship and trade. He said they had no interest in war with anyone. Verthon made a sound that might have been laughter. He declared that humanity's wishes were not relevant. He gave them 30 days to surrender all military vessels and accept permanent occupation. He warned that resistance would result in the complete destruction of their species. The screen went dark. Lieutenant. Dawson turned to Daniel with fear in her eyes. She asked what they should do. Before Daniel could answer, alarms began screaming throughout the ship. His tactical officer, a stocky man named Lieutenant Ben Crawford, reported that 300 warships had just dropped out of hyperspace around them. He said they were completely surrounded. Daniel looked at the tactical display, felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his shoulders. His single ship, the finest humanity had built, was surrounded by an armada that could reduce it to atoms in seconds. For a moment, he considered surrender. Perhaps the Dominion would be merciful. Then he remembered the coldness in Verthon's eyes. There would be no mercy from creatures like that. He ordered his helmsman to take them out of here at maximum speed. He told Dawson to send everything they had recorded back to Earth. The Resilience shot forward, its engines burning bright as it raced toward the edge of the enemy formation. Dominion ships opened fire, and Daniel watched as his ship's shields absorbed blow after blow. Warnings flashed across every console. The hull groaned under the strain. But Daniel had not survived 3 decades of service by giving up easily. He pushed his ship through gaps in the enemy formation that should not have existed. He used asteroids as cover and the gravity of a nearby planet to slingshot past the heaviest concentration of enemy vessels. And somehow, impossibly, they escaped. The jump to hyperspace was rough. Half the ship's systems were damaged, and 17 of his crew were dead. But they were alive, and more importantly, Earth would know what was coming. On Earth. President Catherine Walsh received the emergency transmission at 3 in the morning. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen humanity through its greatest challenges. She had been president for 6 years, guiding Earth through an era of unprecedented prosperity and expansion. Now she faced its greatest threat, by dawn. She had gathered the United Earth Council in the secure bunker beneath the Capitol. Military commanders, scientists, and diplomats filled the room, all of them watching the recording from the Resilience with growing horror. Admiral George Patterson spoke first. He was an old soldier, scarred from battles fought before most of the council members were born. He reported that their fleet consisted of 60 vessels capable of interstellar travel. He stated that even with all planetary defenses, they could not match the force that had been shown. The room fell silent. 60 ships against an empire that commanded hundreds, perhaps thousands. The math was simple and terrible, but then Dr. Lisa Morgan stood up. She was the head of Earth's most secret weapons program, a position so classified that half the council did not know she existed. She was a thin woman with wild gray hair and eyes that burned with intelligence. She told them that she had been preparing for this day for 20 years. She explained that they had developed technologies that had never been used. She described weapons that could tear holes in space itself. She mentioned shields that could stop anything the Dominion had shown. She asked for permission to begin full production. President Walsh looked around the room at the frightened faces of humanity's leaders. She thought about the billions of people on Earth and the millions more on the colony worlds who were counting on them to keep them safe. She thought about her own grandchildren just starting their lives, deserved a future free from alien domination. She announced her decision. She stated that they would not fire the first shot because that was not who humanity was. But she made clear that if the Dominion wanted a war, they would give them one that the galaxy would never forget. The council voted unanimously to prepare for war. Factories that had produced luxury goods began making weapons. Scientists who had studied the stars began designing ways to defend them. Soldiers who had known only peace began training for battles that would decide the fate of their species. Humanity had been given 30 days. To surrender, they chose to fight instead, and far away. Aboard his flagship, High Commander Verthon reviewed reports of the escaped human vessel with mild irritation. One ship had fled. It meant nothing. In 30 days, humanity would kneel like all the others before them. He had conquered 47 species. Humans would simply be number 40-8. He could not have been more wrong. The Dominion did not wait 30 days. On day 12, when humanity was still scrambling to prepare its defenses, the alien fleet struck without warning. Commander Nathan Cole was eating breakfast with his family when the sky turned red. He was stationed on New Geneva, one of humanity's largest colony worlds, home to 2 million people who had built a new life among the stars. His wife, Maria, was pouring coffee while their daughter, Sophie, just 7 years old, was telling them about a dream she had the night before. Then the first bombs fell. Nathan threw himself over his family as the windows exploded inward. The sound was like nothing he had ever heard, a deep rumbling roar that shook the very ground beneath them. When he looked up, half the city was on fire. He was a military man, trained for moments like this, so he pushed down his fear and grabbed his family. He told them they needed to get to the shelter. He promised them everything would be okay, but even as he said the words, he knew they might be lies. The sky was full of alien ships, hundreds of them, raining death down on everything below. The planetary defense grid, supposed to protect them from exactly this kind of attack, was already silent. The Dominion had destroyed it in the first 30 seconds of their assault. Nathan led his family through streets filled with screaming people. Buildings collapsed around them. Fires spread faster than anyone could fight them. He saw things that would haunt him for the rest of his life, but he kept moving, kept pushing forward toward the military bunker that was their only hope. They were 3 blocks away when the second wave of bombing began. The explosion threw Nathan 20 feet through the air. When he woke up, he was buried under rubble, his ears ringing, his body broken in a dozen places. He called out for Maria and Sophie, but there was no answer. He dug himself free and searched through the debris with bleeding hands. He found them together, still holding each other. They looked peaceful, like they were sleeping. But they would never wake up again. Nathan held his wife and daughter in his arms and screamed until his voice gave out. Around him, the city continued to burn. That was how Sergeant Diane Porter found him 3 hours later. She was leading what remained of their unit through the ruins, searching for survivors. She was a tough woman, 15 years in Special Forces with show. RT dark hair and a scar across her left cheek. She had seen death before, more times than she could count. But the sight of her commander cradling his dead family nearly broke her. She knelt beside him and spoke softly. She told him she was sorry, that there were no words that could make this better. But she also told him that there were survivors who needed them, that the fight was not over yet. Nathan looked up at her with empty eyes. He asked why they should bother fighting. He said the aliens had won. Diane grabbed his shoulders and forced him to look at her. She told him that the aliens had not won anything. She explained that they had started a war they did not understand. She reminded him that humans did not surrender, did not give up, and did not stop fighting until the last one of them was dead. She asked if he was going to let his wife and daughter die for nothing, or if he was going to make the bastards pay for what they had done. Something changed in Nathan's eyes. The emptiness was replaced by something harder, colder, more dangerous. He carefully laid his family down, closed their eyes, and stood up. His voice was steady when he spoke. He asked Diane what their situation was. She told him they had 12 Marines left from a garrison of 500. She reported that the communications array was still standing 3 miles to the north. She explained that if they could reach it, they could warn Earth about exactly what the Dominion was doing. Nathan nodded. He ordered them to move out. That was the moment the resistance on New Geneva was born. Meanwhile, in orbit above the burning colony, High Commander Verthin watched the destruction with satisfaction. His ships had performed exactly as expected. The human defenses had crumbled in minutes. Within days, the survivors would be rounded up and processed, their spirit broken, ready to serve the Dominion. His second-in-command, Subcommander Kethra, approached with a data tablet. She reported that resistance was continuing in several population centers. She noted that casualties among their ground forces were higher than projected. Verthin waved dismissively. He declared that it was always this way with new conquests. He explained that they would make examples of the resistors, and the rest would fall in line. He stated that no species had ever successfully opposed the Dominion once their worlds were occupied. Kethra hesitated before speaking again. She mentioned that intercepted communications suggested the humans were not preparing to surrender. She reported that their home planet was mobilizing for total war. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Verthina's face, but it passed quickly. He declared that Earth would fall, just as this colony had fallen. He proclaimed that humans were nothing special, just another species that needed to learn their place in the galaxy. On Earth, President Walsh watched the footage from New Geneva with tears streaming down her face. The destruction was total. The Dominion had not tried to minimize civilian casualties. They had targeted hospitals, schools, and residential areas. They had executed prisoners in the streets. They had broadcasted all across human space as a warning. The message was clear: surrender or die. Admiral Patterson stood beside her, his weathered face carved from stone. He reported that New Geneva was not the only target. He explained that 3 more colonies had been hit simultaneously. He estimated casualties in the hundreds of thousands. President Walsh wiped her eyes and turned to face her military council. Her voice was steady, despite her grief. She acknowledged what the Dominion had done. She described how they had murdered civilians, slaughtered children, and burned cities to the ground. She declared that they thought this would break humanity. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an edge of steel. She stated that they were wrong. She announced that every factory would produce weapons. She ordered that every ship would be armed. She commanded that every person capable of fighting would be trained. She declared that the Dominion wanted humanity afraid. But they would show them what human rage looked like instead. Her speech was broadcast across all surviving human worlds. On ships fleeing the fallen colonies, survivors listened with clenched fists. In factories on Earth, Workers began shifts that would not end until the war was over. In military academies, cadets who should have had years more training prepared to graduate early, and on New Geneva. Nathan Cole led his small band of survivors through the ruins of the city. They had reached the communications array and sent their message to Earth. Now they were gathering other survivors, teaching them to fight. Building something from the ashes of everything they had lost, Diane walked beside him through a burned-out neighborhood. She commented that the Dominion thought occupation meant victory. She observed that they had never faced an enemy who kept fighting after defeat. Nathan looked at the fires still burning in the distance. He replied that the Dominion had made a mistake. He explained that they had not conquered humanity. He declared that they had only made humanity angry, somewhere above them. Hidden among the orbital debris, a small human probe recorded everything. The data it gathered would help design the weapons that would one day turn the tide. The Dominion did not know it was there. They were about to learn that humans were very good at hiding, at waiting, and at striking when their enemies least expected it. The war had only just begun. 6 months had passed since the war began. The Dominion now controlled 12 of humanity's 23 colony worlds. Their advance seemed unstoppable. Their commanders spoke of final victory within weeks. But something strange was happening. On the occupied planets, Governor Tethrol was a veteran. Administrator who had overseen the pacification of 6 species during his long career. He knew how conquered peoples behaved. They mourned, they submitted, and eventually they accepted their new masters. It was the natural order of things. Humans refused to follow the natural order. He sat in his office in the ruined capital of New Geneva, reading the daily casualty reports with growing frustration. Another supply convoy destroyed. 3 patrol units ambushed. 2 senior officers assassinated in their beds. The resistance was growing stronger, not weaker. Despite every punishment he inflicted, he dictated his report to the High Commander with barely controlled anger. He described how they had executed hundreds of resistance fighters. He explained how they had destroyed entire neighborhoods suspected of harboring rebels. He detailed how they had cut food rations and imposed curfews. He confessed that nothing worked. He admitted that for every human he killed, 2 more seemed to take their place. The report ended with something Tethrol had never written before in his entire career. He requested reinforcements. 30,000 soldiers were not enough to hold this planet deep beneath the ruins of New Geneva. Nathan Cole reviewed his own reports in a bunker that had once been a subway station. 6 months of fighting had transformed him. The grief-stricken commander who had held his dead family was gone. In his place was a man the Dominion had learned to fear. They called him the Ghost because he struck without warning and vanished without a trace. His resistance army had grown from 12 Marines to over 5,000 fighters. They were not professional soldiers. They were teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, and factory workers. They were mothers who had lost children and children who had lost parents. They were united by a single purpose: to make the Dominion pay for every drop of human blood they had spilled. Diane. Porter spread a map across the table. She had become Nathan's second in command, the one person he trusted completely. She pointed to a series of marks on the map as she spoke. She reported that their network now stretched across 3 continents. She explained that they had cells in every major city the Dominion controlled. She noted that their intelligence suggested the occupation force was stretched thin. Nathan studied the map carefully. He said they needed to do more than harass them. He explained they needed to tie them down so completely that they could not send reinforcements to the front lines. He declared they needed to make New Geneva a trap. One of his lieutenants, a former high school teacher named Carol Jennings, looked up from her own reports. She reminded them that they did not have the weapons to fight the Dominion directly. She pointed out their fighters had hunting rifles and homemade explosives. Nathan smiled grimly. He told her they did not need better weapons. He explained they had something the Dominion did not understand: knowledge of the terrain, support from the population, and the willingness to die rather than surrender. He stated that was worth more than all the alien technology in the galaxy. Meanwhile, in free human space, Admiral Patterson was preparing something the Dominion would never expect. The old admiral stood in the command center of humanity's secret shipyard, hidden in the asteroid belt beyond Mars around him. Workers labored around the clock building weapons of war. The 60 ships they had started with had grown to 200. Each one carried technology the Dominion had never seen. Dr. Lisa Morgan walked beside him through the massive facility. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night since the war began. Her eyes were red with exhaustion, but her voice crackled with excitement as she explained their progress. She described the gravitic disruptor, pointing to a torpedo-like device being loaded onto a ship. She explained that it created a focused gravity wave that ignored conventional shields. She stat. That Dominion shields were electromagnetic, which meant they were completely vulnerable. Patterson nodded approvingly. He asked about their other projects. Lisa led him to another section of the shipyard, where technicians were working on something that looked like a standard hyperspace drive. She explained this was their real advantage. She noted that the Dominion believed hyperspace jumps could not be made near gravity wells. She said that was because their technology could not do it. She revealed that human technology was different. Patterson's eyes widened as he understood what she was saying. He realized they could jump directly into the enemy's home system. Lisa confirmed his understanding. She explained they could appear inside their defensive perimeter before they knew what was happening. She warned there was one problem. She said they would only get one chance. Once the Dominion saw what their ships could do, they would develop countermeasures. She emphasized that they had to make their first strike count. Patterson thought about this for a long moment. He knew what she was suggesting. Instead of fighting to reclaim their colonies one by one, they should strike directly at the heart of the Dominion Empire. It was bold, perhaps even reckless. But humanity was running out of time and options. He asked if she could have the fleet. Ready in 3 months. Lisa pushed her wild gray hair back from her face. She replied that she could have it ready in 2, far across the galaxy, or on a world the humans had never seen. The Dominion Senate gathered to hear reports on the war. The chamber was vast, designed to intimidate, filled with representatives from the 47 conquered species who had learned to obey their masters. High Commander Verthon presented his report with confidence. He announced that 12 human worlds were now under their control. He stated that their resistance would crumble within weeks. He declared that soon Earth itself would fall. But one senator, an elder statesman named Krathel, raised a troubling question. He observed that the humans had been fighting for 6 months. He noted that no other species had resisted this long. He asked if they had considered that humans might be different. Verthon dismissed the concern with a wave of his 4 arms. He proclaimed that humans were flesh and blood, like any other species. He asserted that they could be broken, and they would be broken. High Arbiter Methkai, supreme ruler of the Dominion, listened from his throne without expression. He had conquered more species than anyone alive. He had seen resistance before, and he had always crushed it. But something in the reports from the occupied worlds troubled him. The humans fought with a ferocity he had never encountered. They died rather than surrender. And for every victory his forces claimed, the cost seemed to grow higher. He spoke softly, and the chamber fell silent. He ordered that reinforcements be sent to the front lines. He commanded that the humans be crushed before they could become a greater threat. But even as he gave the order, a small voice in his mind wondered if it might already be too late. On New Geneva, Nathan Cole stood on a rooftop watching Dominion patrols move through the streets below. In 2 hours, his forces would launch their largest attack yet, striking simultaneously at targets across the planet. It would not win the war, but it would show the Dominion that humanity would never stop fighting. Diane joined him on the rooftop. She mentioned that word from Earth had arrived. She said the fleet was almost ready. She explained that in 2 months, humanity would strike back. Nathan did not take his eyes off the enemy below. He said they just needed to hold out until then. He ordered her to make sure every resistance cell knew what they were fighting for. He declared that freedom was coming, and they just had to survive long enough to see it. Below them, unaware of what was about to happen, Dominion soldiers continued their patrol. They thought they were the hunters. They were about to learn they were the prey. The Dominion homeworld had known peace for 1,000 years. Its cities were monuments to conquest, built with the labor of subjugated species. decorated with treasures stolen from 100 worlds. Its people had never heard the sound of enemy weapons. They believed themselves untouchable. That belief died on a quiet morning when the sky tore open and human warships poured through. High Arbiter Methkai was addressing the Senate when the first alarm sounded. He stopped mid-sentence, confused by the wailing sirens that echoed through the ancient chamber. Such alarms had not been triggered in living memory. Many senators did not even know what they meant. An aide rushed in with panic written across his alien features. He stammered out his report. Human ships had appeared inside the defensive perimeter. The defensive grid was firing, but could not stop them. The enemy was heading directly for the capital. Meth single quotes Kairos from his throne with cold fury. He demanded to know how this was possible. He noted that their gravity wells prevented hyperspace jumps anywhere near the system. The aide had no answer. Human technology was not supposed to work this way. Nothing was supposed to work this way. Commodore Daniel Harper stood on the bridge of the Resilience, watching the chaos unfold on his tactical display. His fleet of 150 ships had emerged exactly where Dr. Morgan had promised they would. Inside the Dominion's supposedly impenetrable defenses, around him, enemy vessels scrambled to respond. But they were too slow, too surprised, too unprepared for what was happening. Lieutenant Commander Amy Dawson called out from her station. She reported that enemy battleships were moving to intercept. She counted 30 vessels closing on their position. Daniel kept his voice calm. He ordered all ships to fire gravitic dizzers. Across the human fleet, weapons that had never been used in combat came to life. The torpedoes they fired looked ordinary, but when they struck the Dominion ships, the results were extraordinary. Instead of exploding against shields, they passed through as if the shields did not exist. Inside each enemy vessel, focused gravity waves tore through metal and flesh alike. 30 battleships became 30 expanding clouds of debris in less than 10 seconds. Amy stared at her display with wide eyes. She announced that their shields had no effect. She said the weapons worked exactly as Dr. Morgan had predicted. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. He acknowledged Dr. Morgan's success. Then his face hardened again. He ordered the fleet to press the attack. He reminded them that they had a schedule to keep. The space battle was brief and brutal. Dominion ships that had terrorized human colonies for months were destroyed with ease. Their commanders had no tactics for enemies who could appear anywhere and whose weapons ignored all defenses. Some tried to flee. Human ships ran them down. Some tried to surrender. Daniel accepted their surrender with more mercy than the Dominion had shown humanity. Within 2 hours. The Dominion home system belonged to humanity, but the war was not over yet, Colonel. Nathan Cole led the ground assault personally. He had been pulled from the resistance on New Geneva for this mission, the most important operation of the war. His dropship descended through alien skies toward the capital city below. Carrying 500 of humanity's finest soldiers, Diane sat beside him, checking her weapon for the 10th time. She observed that it was a long way from fighting in the ruins of New Geneva. Nathan looked out the window at the alien cityscape rushing past. He responded that it was the same war. He explained they were just finishing what they started. The landing was hot. Dominion ground forces, recovered from their initial shock, poured fire at the descending human ships. Nathan felt his dropship shudder as it took hits, but the pilot held steady. Bringing them down exactly where they needed to be, the ramp dropped, and Nathan charged out into an alien world. The air smelled wrong. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth. The buildings around him were designed for creatures much larger than humans. None of that mattered. He had a job to do. The fighting through the city was fierce. The Dominion soldiers were well-trained and well-equipped, but they had never faced enemies like humans before. Nathan's troops moved with speed and coordination that seemed almost supernatural to alien eyes. They used cover expertly, communicated silently, and supported each other with a loyalty that the Dominion had never understood. 3 hours after landing, Nathan and his team reached the Senate building. The doors were massive. Designed to impress visitors with the power of the Dominion, Nathan barely glanced at them. He ordered his demolition expert to blow them open. The explosion echoed through halls that had never known violence. Nathan led his team inside, moving quickly through corridors filled with fleeing bureaucrats and panicked servants. He was not interested in them. He had one target, and nothing would stop him from reaching it. They found High Arbiter Kai in the throne room. The supreme ruler of the Dominion stood surrounded by his personal guard, 20 of the finest soldiers his empire could produce. They were armed with the most advanced weapons available. They had trained their entire lives for moments like this. They lasted less than 30 seconds. When the smoke cleared, only Methkai remained standing. His guards lay dead around him, but the old alien had not moved from his position. He faced Nathan with something that might have been respect. He spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. He acknowledged that humans were everything the reports had suggested. He conceded that they were fierce, resourceful, and utterly without fear. He asked a simple cue. Yuzen. He asked what Nathan was waiting for. Nathan lowered his weapon. The soldiers around him exchanged confused glances. Diane stepped forward, concern in her voice. She asked Nathan what he was doing. Nathan did not take his eyes off Methkai. He explained his thoughts to the alien. He said the Dominion had killed millions of humans. He revealed that his wife and daughter had been among them. He described how he had dreamed of this moment since the day they died. He admitted he had imagined killing Methkai in 100 different ways. He paused. And when he continued, his voice was quieter. He said he was not going to do that. He explained that humanity was not like the Dominion. He declared they were going to do something the Dominion had never done in 1,000 years of conquest. They were going to offer mercy. Methkai stared at the human with obvious confusion. He demanded to know why. He pointed out that his people had done terrible things. He stated that he had done terrible things. He asked why Nathan would show mercy. Nathan finally looked away, his eyes finding the alien sky visible through the throne room windows. He explained that when humans looked at the Dominion, they saw what they could become. He described an empire built on cruelty, maintained through fear that destroyed everything it could not control. He said they refused to become that. He met Methkaya's silver eyes again. He acknowledged that he wanted revenge. He admitted that he wanted to make the Dominion feel every bit of pain they had caused. But he said that was exactly why he would not do it. He explained that if he gave in to that hatred, the Dominion would win even in defeat. They would have proved that violence was the only way, that mercy was weakness, that the strong should always crush the weak. He shook his head slowly. He declared that humans were better than that. Methkai was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he sank to his knees. It was the first time in his long life that he had knelt before anyone. He did not understand this enemy. He did not understand how a species that fought so fiercely could choose mercy when they had one. But in that moment, he understood something else. The Dominion had not just lost a war. They had encountered something they had never expected to find among the stars. A species that was stronger precisely because they chose to be kind. Above them, through the alien sky, human ships maintained their vigil. The war was not over yet, but the hardest part was done. Humanity had won, and they had done it without becoming monsters themselves. The Treaty of Earth was signed on a bright spring morning. 1 year after the war began, the ceremony took place in the rebuilt United Nations building, a structure that had stood for centuries as a symbol of human cooperation. Now it would witness something even more remarkable: the end of the Dominion's 1,000-year reign of terror and the birth of something new. President Catherine Walsh stood at the podium, looking out at an audience that would have been unimaginable just 2 years earlier. Human diplomats sat alongside representatives from the 47 species the Dominion had conquered. Former enemies sat beside former friends. The future sat beside the past. High Arbiter Methkai, stripped of his title but not his dignity, approached the signing table. He moved slowly, like a creature carrying a great weight. In a way, he was. He carried the guilt of 1,000 years of conquest, of millions of lives destroyed, of countless cultures erased. He had spent months in human custody learning exactly what his empire had done. He had also spent those months learning about humanity. The treaty documents were spread across the table. The terms were harsh by any measure. The Dominion would release all occupied human worlds. They would pay reparations for the destruction they had caused. Their military would be reduced to a purely defensive force. They would free all the species they had conquered over the centuries. But the treaty also contained something else. Something that puzzled Methkai even as he signed his name beside President Walsh's signature. The Dominion would not be destroyed. They would not be occupied or subjugated. Instead, they would join a new galactic council, where their voice would be equal to any other species. They would have the chance to rebuild, to change, to become something better than what they had been. After the signing, Methkai approached President Walsh privately. He asked the question that had haunted him since his capture. He asked why. He said humanity could have destroyed them. He noted that they had the power to conquer the Dominion, as the Dominion had conquered others. He asked why they chose peace instead. President Walsh looked at the old alien with something like compassion. She explained that humanity had learned some things during their long and violent history. She said they had learned that empires built on conquest always fell eventually. She observed that hatred passed from generation to generation until it consumed everything. She noted that revenge felt satisfying in the moment, but left nothing but ashes behind. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. She said they wanted something different. She explained they wanted a galaxy where different species could live together without fear. She admitted they did not know if it was possible. She declared they had to try. Across the galaxy. The news of the treaty spread like wildfire on New Geneva, now being rebuilt with both human and dew. Minion labor Nathan Cole watched the broadcast in the company of friends who had become family. Diane sat beside him, along with Carol Jennings and dozens of other resistance fighters who had survived the war. The resistance headquarters had been transformed into a community center. Where they had once planned ambushes, children now played. Where weapons had been stored, food was now distributed. The war was over. Life was slowly returning to normal. But some scars would never fully heal. Nathan stepped outside as the celebration continued. Walking through streets that still bore the marks of battle, he stopped at a small memorial that had been built in a quiet corner of the city. It bore the names of every human who had died on New Geneva during the war. Thousands of names carved into black stone. Maria Cole, Sophie Cole. He traced his fingers over their names, just as he had done countless times before. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had changed over the months since the war ended. The sharp edge had dulled into something more like sorrow, a permanent ache that reminded him of what he had lost. Diane found him there, as she always did. She stood beside him in comfortable silence, respecting his grief without trying to fix it. Finally, Nathan spoke. He said he used to hate them. He explained that he used to dream about killing every last one of them. He admitted that after Maria and Sophie died, he did not care about anything except revenge. He turned to look at her. He said something had changed during the assault on the Dominion homeworld. He described standing in front of Methkai with the power to kill him and realizing that his wife would not have wanted that. He explained Sophie would not have wanted that. He said they would have wanted him to be better than his hatred. Diane nodded slowly. She remarked that choosing mercy was harder than choosing revenge. She said it took real strength. Nathan looked back at the memorial. He replied that he was not sure if it was strength. He thought maybe it was just tiredness. He said he was tired of death, tired of hatred, tired of fighting. He expressed his desire to build something instead of destroying it. He gestured toward the city around them. He pointed out that Dominion workers were helping rebuild the homes they had destroyed. He observed human children were playing with alien children in the streets. He noted that a year ago, none of that would have been possible. He said maybe that was worth more than revenge. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways no one had predicted. The species the Dominion had conquered for centuries emerged from their long nightmare of occupation. Some wanted revenge against their former masters. They looked to humanity, expecting support for their anger. Instead, they found a different message. Admiral Patterson, now the commander of all human military forces, traveled to dozens of worlds to deliver it personally. He told them he understood their anger. He said no one understood it better than humanity. He explained that they had lost millions to the Dominion, had seen their colonies burned and their people slaughtered. But he also told them something else. He said revenge was a chain that bound them to the past. He explained that as long as they defined themselves by their hatred of the Dominion, they would never truly be free. He said humanity had chosen to break that chain. He asked them to consider doing the same. Not everyone listened. Some species formed their own fleets and launched attacks against Dominion worlds. When they did, they found human ships standing in their way. Dr. Lisa Morgan, the architect of humanity's victory, spoke about this in an interview years later. She explained that it was strange. She said they had built the most powerful weapons in the galaxy, weapons that could destroy entire fleets. She noted they had used those weapons once to win a war. She smiled when she continued. She said now they used them to protect the species that had tried to destroy them. She admitted that people thought humanity was crazy. She said maybe they were right, but she declared that being crazy was better than being cruel. 20 years after the war, the Galactic Council had grown to include over 100 species. Humans served alongside former enemies and former friends, working together to solve problems that affected everyone. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, still moments when old hatreds threatened to resurface, but there was also hope. Nathan Cole, now an old man with white hair and weathered hands, returned to New Geneva one last time. He walked through streets that bore no trace of the war, past buildings that had been rebuilt stronger than before, to the memorial where his wife and daughter were remembered. A young girl was there, no older than Sophie had been when she died. She was placing flowers at the base of the memorial. Reading the names carved into stone, she noticed Nathan watching and asked if he had lost someone in the war. Nathan nodded. He said he had lost his wife and daughter. The girl's eyes filled with sympathy. She said she was sorry. Then she asked what their names were. Nathan smiled, the first genuine smile he had managed in longer than he could remember. He told her their names were Maria and Sophie. He said they were wonderful people. The girl promised to remember them. Then she ran off to join her friends, a mixed group of human and alien children playing together in the shadow of the memorial. Nathan watched them go, tears streaming down his face. Not tears of grief this time, but something else. Something that felt almost like joy. This was what Maria and Sophie would have wanted. Not revenge, not hatred, not endless war. They would have wanted a galaxy where children of all species could play together without fear, where old enemies could become new friends, where the cycle of violence could finally end. Humanity had given the galaxy that gift. Not through conquest, not through domination, but through the simple choice to be better than their pain. The Dominion had learned their lesson the hard way. They had learned that humanity was not to be trifled with, but they had also learned something more important. They had learned that true strength was not measured in weapons or warships. It was measured in the courage to choose mercy when revenge would be easier. It was measured in the wisdom to build rather than destroy. It was measured in the hope that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. Humanity had shown the galaxy what that kind of strength looked like, and the galaxy would never forget.